Do you guys ever feel that you were wildly unprepared for marriage? Not just you, but your wife. I mean, if you really, really think about this, marriage is like one area of our entire existence where it's like, oh yeah, just go do that and you'll figure it out along the way. Actually, scratch that. We do the same thing with kids, like being a parent. They send you home with this bundle of joy, this baby, and they're like, oh, don't worry, you'll figure it out. Best time of your life. There's some books, maybe some YouTube videos or whatever. But man, like we are literally left to figure this out on our own. Like this is the way society sets us up. It's kind of crazy. However, we can rewrite that story. We can do something different. And now we have the resources at our fingertips for education. I have somebody on that is really fascinating. Her name is January Donovan. Yes, just like the month. She is the founder of the Women's School and the Wholeness Coaching School. She's been training women for over 20 years, and in under 3 years, she has built a multi-million-dollar company reaching thousands of students in over 50 countries. She is also the author of a book called The New Woman Masterclass. If you've ever felt like you are doing the work, but the connection at home feels flat, or you feel like your marriage feels like roommates, like you literally feel like roommates, maybe it feels like a partnership, or maybe like friends, this conversation is going to hit you in a way that you probably didn't expect. So gentlemen, this is January Donovan. Let's get into it. So it's kind of weird that I'm interviewing January in January.
That's right.
But our podcast is coming out February 5th. So this is kind of weird, right?
It's my confusing time of the year because everybody's talking about January. So I'm like on the doctor's office. I'm like, oh, they're not talking about me. They're talking about life and schedule and not about me. So anyways, I'm grateful. It makes a good conversation.
I love that. I'm so curious. How did your parents name you?
Okay, so there's actually a book about a girl named January in 1979. It was a bestseller, and it was called Once Is Not Enough, and it was about a woman's self-worth. Is that crazy? This was just what I teach. Yes, actually, my title is Forbes Top Self-Worth Strategist, and that's the book that I was named after. Was a woman who had struggled her own self-worth. I didn't even actually believe my mom. I thought it was kind of a joke, but I found the book because I met a girl who was named after the same book with the same exact narrative. Is that crazy? I have the book.
That is wild.
I know, it is wild. So, I think Providence, there's a reason, and so it was a woman who really struggled with living out her sexuality in a way that fulfilled her. Is that crazy?
That is
what I
crazy.
teach women. Yeah. So there's a reason.
And so how did you get involved with this work? I mean, and how long have you been doing this work for? Because I asked this question because I always like to go back to, like when we were in third grade, be like, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up? I just had this woman on who is a sex educator. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure you probably didn't say that in third grade. I want to be a sex educator when I get older. So I'm so curious, how did you even get involved with this work?
Yeah, great question. The short answer is because my wound led me to the work that I am doing. I think our wounds become the compass towards our contribution if we just have the eyes to see it. But really, it's since I was 18, I met a woman who, in my freshman year of college, who said, January, what kind of a woman do you want to be? And she was kind of I was a mentor to a lot of the college girls there. I met her my freshman year. And I remember looking at her, Elena, and I said, Elena, you don't have a choice. And she said, yes, you do. Let's train you. And so for 3.5 years, I met with her every single month, except for summers. And she trained me with skill after skill after skill. And that became the foundation because this very wounded woman started to see so much flourishing in every part of my life. The first training, and I say training, it's like athletes train. So that's how she viewed it, was to get rid of comparison and competition. And that completely was eradicated all through my college years. To write out my routine daily, I had to get up at 4:30 in the morning to study myself, to pray. I did it all through college. I'm telling you, it was very unusual, but my wound gave me such passion to change my life. And so I realized I wasn't the only woman so wounded. And the only difference is that I had a mentor who trained me. And so I started doing it. I remember my junior year in college, I created a celebration for women to celebrate what it meant to be a woman. And I had everyone on college campus. So really, it's been, I think, 25 years that I've been training women. I did it for free for 15 years. It was just part of, I think, a sense of deep gratitude for what I feel like I had been given, but also a sense of purpose.
When you say, so first of all, there are two things, right, that really, really just jump out. Number one, someone who spent all this time with you every single month, except for the summers. Like, my gosh, we should also be so lucky to have somebody like that in our life. But also, what was, you mentioned the wound a couple times. What was that about?
Do you want me to just hit it straight ahead?
Sure.
Okay. At 16, I moved here from the Philippines. I was 11, and in the Philippines, you were always told, literally, your subconscious mind was told that Americans were beautiful and everyone else was secondary. And so I had this wound of I could never be beautiful enough to find a man in my life, and that was sort of I don't know if it was just an underlying in a third world country. I'm not sure, but that's really what I felt like was a common knowledge. And so I remember coming to the United States at 11 because I didn't see my parents for 5 years straight. That's how you do it legally
So wait, you
to
didn't
get your
see your
visa.
parents for
No,
5 years?
no.
Are you
Yeah,
serious?
yeah.
Well, so real quick, like, where did you stay? What was happening there?
So my parents, I think I was 7. I was 7 years old, decided that we needed to move out of a country that was kind of corrupt, right? And so they really my first awareness were in the slums of the Philippines, and then they kind of moved themselves up. And then they said, we have to go to America. So my dad asked his youngest sister to stay with us. So I stayed with them for 5 years. I mean, it was, it's not ideal, but honestly, because of the family, like I thought, I always felt like there was community, but it was hard. Imagine leaving your children right now. I could never do it, but that's the price tag that they had to pay. And so yeah, a lot of my formative years were done reflecting as a little girl and doing it on my own. And I think in some ways that was the gift. I could see it as trauma, or I really harvested so much from it. And that was also just kind of what my mentor helped me see as well. So anyways, I moved here when I was 11, and I remember thinking, Larry, I thought no man would ever like me, because you just no one would like somebody who was sort of a second class citizen. And so the first guy that liked me, I said, like, sign me up. That was just, I was, I don't know, 13. And so I dated a guy and didn't know anything about sex. And by 16, got pregnant. It was like the only encounter I have. And I remember I had sort of really transitioned really well. I was, president of the school and homecoming queen, all the external things that really didn't matter. And so I came in, she said, January, you have to get an abortion. And I said, what's an abortion? I just didn't even know what it was. And so I did. And I walked out of that abortion clinic and I died. A part of me died. I didn't know why. And then this was in the process of dating a guy I didn't really like. I dated him because I thought he was the only one I could have. I wanted to break up with him. 3 months later, I wanted to break up with him. In the process of trying to break up with him, I got pregnant again later for the second time, and I had my second abortion. That time I was a walking zombie. Nobody knew, maybe one friend. And so my wound was gaping because I endured it alone. I felt like I didn't understand my sexuality. I wasn't a bad person. Like I had one boyfriend because I thought that was the only way felt like I could have somebody. Didn't have any training and understanding the gift of being a woman, how to communicate with men effectively, draw firm boundaries, the things that I think would have saved me from that pain. And then I walked out of that, no mentor, no help, nothing, and just kind of lived a quiet life of desperation. And so those years were very formative in a sense that it was traumatic, but it also fueled me to ask questions of, why, how did I get to that point? Why are women suffering? And so when I met Elena, my freshman year in college, I was so broken, but didn't have the language for it. When she would say, get rid of comparison culture and get up at 4:30 in the morning, I was like, yes, sign me up. I did everything that she asked of me. As a matter of fact, I actually still have, like, I sometimes show this, but this is like literally like every single month I had to write my training. This is so silly, but I just had this in here just because I was showing. You can't see it. But this is back to back of the things I needed to change about myself. Every single month, I submitted this back to back. You can't see it, but it's like how to eat healthy, how to get up at 4:30 in the morning, how to think well of men, how to think well of women, how to think well of myself. I mean, it was very strategic. I mean, she only met with me for maybe 45 minutes every month. But because my wound was so real and so raw, I went above and beyond. And I was so committed to becoming the right woman for the right man.
Was Elena somebody who's the same age as you?
No, she was probably 10, 15 years. She was a mentor to all the women there. So it wasn't like just me. It was she did it. She had she was in the travel team. So she kind of went every month. And so she's actually dedicated a little bit of the book to her. I still keep in contact with her, and she doesn't ever take the credit. She was a mentor, which is why I think feminine mentorship is something that needs to be revived, because we no longer have the infrastructure of mothers and grandmothers that used to impart wisdom and training the way it used to be. So now women, we assume we know how to be a woman, and we don't. Women are struggling every single day, Larry.
Wow. I see the same need for young men as well, right? Big time. But for someone like Elena to come into your life and be that mentor, I mean, that's a game changer. I mean, I know I've had people in my life that have been a huge game changer. Question for you, just as you refer to this as training, right?
Yeah.
Do you find that when you explain this in that way to other women, like training, are they put off by that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah.
You know
Tell me
why?
about that.
Yeah.
No, I would love to know.
Discipline is a bad word. And I'll tell you, we've been living in this sort of world where I am woman, hear me roar. I can do whatever I want whenever I feel like it with no consequence. We've 150 years ago, women had limited freedom, and this idea of being fragile and compliant and small, that was not healthy for women and men, right? But then we kind of went the radical extreme of men don't matter. You can be whatever men want, and rage, is empowerment, and femininity suppress masculinity. Both radical extremes have consequence right now, and that consequence is that I can do whatever I want whenever I feel like it. There's no discipline, and it doesn't matter. There's no more guardrails of discipline and training. So when I say training, they don't like it. But everybody wants to win the Olympic gold medal if that's their desire, right? Everybody wants to have an incredible marriage that gets better every single year. Everybody wants to achieve the deepest, boldest, biggest desires of their heart. But who's going to do the work? And however way you want to slice it, discipline and training outside of, success is not possible. It's like, so I think what we need to do is to reintroduce what I love this word called formation, meaning the development of our mindset and our skills to actually achieve our highest good. Like our highest good. It's not just, I believe the fight is no longer achieving freedom, but it's actually achieving interior freedom. And it's the freedom to choose our highest good. Because for most part of the West, Larry, we have freedom. And women are 8 out of 10 times lonely. 1 out of 5 women are antidepressant, overwhelmed. There's massive frustration and sort of this, comparison and competition with men. We're not flourishing. And we see that with our children. And we're seeing now generational anxiety happening. Why? Because it's generationally lack of training. A woman who doesn't know how to manage her emotion has no capacity to train her daughter to manage her emotion. I have 8 children, 4 girls. And, the idea that women are emotional, therefore you have permission to just feel whatever you want to feel. No, not all feelings are true. And, your feelings are not all valid. And feelings need to be disciplined, and it needs to be ordered, and so I think I think women don't want it, but it's what we need. But I do think that in the last year or two, there's a real hunger for depth, for meaning. And I think we're ready for training. I think we're done with the fluff. We want the substance, and so maybe not yet, but we're determined to say at the end of the day, it's your life. And if you want a beautiful, flourishing life, then you have to train up for it.
You use almost the exact same language that I do when I talk about this, because, I refer, but I think the way it lands for a guy is perhaps maybe a little bit different because we sort of embrace training. We sort of like that kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
um, the thing that I always refer to whenever I'm working with, especially like a new client, and usually that new client is really confused of like, how did I get here? How did my marriage get here? Like, how
Mhm.
did this all happen? Right.
Yeah.
And when I say that, usually there's something in our life that's on fire. It could be our marriage. It could be a gap in communication. It could be we don't have the intimacy or the connection we want with our wives. It could be a lot of things. But the question that I always ask a guy is, how much time have you taken to learn? Like, so if it's communication, how much time have you spent learning about communication and how, not necessarily how you want to talk, but how she receives it,
Hmm.
right? Because that's two different things.
Yeah.
And usually, for the most part, I'll get this, be like, well, I listened to a couple podcasts, or I watched a couple videos, or I read this book. But then the gap is that, yeah, but that's not practice. That's not like going into jujitsu and rolling. That's like reading a book on jujitsu and then trying to go compete, and it's not going to work. And so, like, when I usually use that comparison, especially like I love working with first responders, because like I'm like, hey, if you're a cop, like, how much time did you spend in the academy? And they're like, 6 months, 900 plus hours. I'm like, right. And you're a pretty good cop, right? And they're like, well, yeah, I know everything I'm supposed to do. Well, how much time have you spent training for marriage? And usually, like, there's no such thing. You're not supposed to do that, right?
Mhm.
And you're like, no, you actually are. Like,
Yeah.
just it takes the exact same amount of know-how to be a cop as it does to live a fulfilling marriage as a husband and as a dad. Same thing with a wife, right?
Yes. And I think that's why the idea of training seems to be sort of foreign because every other profession, not only do you train prior, like you train during, right? To continue to actually do your job well. But the idea of training prior to marriage or motherhood, I mean, Larry, think about it. How much do we pay for college education or high school
Oh my
education for our
God.
kids? But at the end of the day, let's just say 500,000, we don't learn decision making. Decision making is crucial to actually create a meaningful life. We make an average of 25,000 decisions a day, and we don't have, yes, and we don't have decision making skill as part of our curriculum. That's robbery. And then we spend billions of dollars, $380 billion in mental health. Where's the training on emotional command? Where's the training on mind management? Where's the training on learning how to say no to ourselves? Not when you're, married, prior and during. Where's the training on tonality? There's no training on marriage. I talk to, couples all the time because we have obviously women and they're always trying to figure out a solution and they feel the need to blame themselves. I said, if nobody ever gave you the foundation of communication is 7% words, 38% tonality, and 55% body language, and you're having communication issue, you've been robbed. Why is that not instilled in our children? I've got a 9-year-old and she says, I'm sorry, mom. I said, well, you are clearly sorry with you 7%, but everything else is not really remorseful. They need to have language. They need to have training now. And we feel like something is wrong with us because there's something wrong with our marriage, when the reality is that there was never training prior to or doing marriage that would have allowed us to have a beautiful marriage.
Yeah.
And now we assume motherhood is hard. That is like the common narrative. I reject it with every fiber of my being. And I'm a mom of 8, and I'm building a pretty substantial company. So I reject it for multiple reasons. It's not that motherhood is hard. It's that you have been undertrained to be a mother. There's hard moments, but if you don't have a routine, if you don't have emotional command for motherhood, you'll be crying when your toddler is crying when you should actually be regulating his emotion because your emotions are deregulated. That's a training that doesn't happen at motherhood. That's a training that happens at 4, 5, 6 incrementally. That's a brain wiring that literally gets layered into our subconscious conditioning. Where does that happen in our marriage? Here's what I tell women. Have you ever been trained to study your man? How do you love something you don't know? I, as a woman, am obligated to love my husband and will his highest good. But if I don't know how to study him, Study his needs, study his weakness, study what maybe makes him, get excited. Study his favorite food. Study the things that maybe are not making him mentally healthy. How can I love him? We are not trained to study men. I'm going to bring it even layer deeper. How can you love the other if you don't love yourself? The way we think of self-love in our culture is me, and more of me. That is a disordered self-love, right? Enough about me. What do you think about me? But it's like fluff love. I mean, that's
Enough
the
about me.
truth.
What do you
We
think
make
of me?
songs about that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I tell women, what does it mean to truly love yourself? To love is to will your highest good. Now, can you love something you don't know? That's straight out of Socrates. In order to love thyself, you have to know thyself. Where is it that we create an infrastructure where we study ourselves so that we can love ourselves, so that we are capable of studying the other and loving the other? Tell me that's missing after $500,000 of education, Larry.
You're preaching to the choir.
Yes.
You are.
And I'm
I
like,
mean, I love the fact that you're a woman and you're saying this as well. And I'll tell you why, because, my wife and I, we're celebrating 23 years of marriage this year. And same as you, before we hit record, you're like, hey, I've been married for 20 years. My marriage just keeps getting better. And I can honestly say ours does too, but for good reason. It wasn't always like that. I mean, the first 17 years were rough. Mm-hmm. First 10 were really rough, but the same as you, as soon as I started doing this work, I've always viewed myself in this podcast as a student. Like right now,
yes,
I'm learning from you. Like this is how I learn, right? But the thing that I used to always point at my wife of like all these problems. Look what she's doing. Look what she's not doing. This, that, like point, and then she would point the finger back at me. But here's the honest truth. Like my wife and I were just talking about this. We've been married, like I said, been married for 23 years. I was like, Jess, how many marriage prep classes did we do? Do you remember? And she's like, 6. And I was like, yeah, 6. How long were they? She's like, an hour and a half. I was like, yeah, an hour and a half. So we've had like 10-ish hours, a little over, of training for 23 years of a marriage. Like that does not seem like it's supposed to roll like that. Not to mention the fact that depending on the season of marriage that you're in, there are different complexities and dynamics at play, like depending on what the kids are doing, where you're at, and that kind of thing. But I have a question I'm dying to ask you, and I just want perspective on this one, because this is one. So I just had a guy who he didn't move forward, and this is, by the way, this is not to work with me one-on-one. This is to just be in one of our masterminds, which is $100 a month. Wow. And for $100 a month, you get access to 40 different coaching calls per week. It's a steal.
It's a steal. Compared to our education system, it's literally pennies.
Right, it's pennies. And this guy told me, he's just like, I can't afford that. And I'm like, and I always want to meet somebody where they're at when they tell me something like that. But I looked at him and I said, that's fair. That's fair. I said, how often do you go out to eat? And he's like, 4 times a week at least. And I'm like, do you drink a lot? Do you drink on the weekends? He was like, yeah, I love to drink. And I'm like, what do you drink? Grey Goose. Like, how often do you buy Grey Goose? He's like, like a bottle every other week. I was like, okay, so there's $50 right there, because Grey Goose is about, 60. Grey Goose is about $30 a bottle. And you're going out to eat 4 times a week. So I'm seeing right here, there's like $300-400 probably just sitting here.
Yeah.
But you're not gonna focus on your marriage. Do these other things. And he was like, yeah. And I was like, I was floored by that. I was like, we're not going to make any adjustments to do something different? And he was like, no, I just going to keep doing this. And I'm like, okay. But I would say that's the exception. That's not the rule. Most guys are like, yeah, I can do that. No problem. Mm-hmm. But like, why are people just so resistant to learning?
I can answer it from my own observation and study. I think they don't know the deepest desires of their heart. We don't study the desires of our heart, because it's not an infrastructure. What I mean by that, it's not something, you're coming to this guy who's probably resistant about he doesn't know himself, right? But if we create an infrastructure where, what do you really want? You know what, to be honest, I want to come home where I feel alive in my marriage. I want to come home where the home is peaceful,
Yep.
that my wife values me. I want to travel the world. I want to find a job that makes me feel like I am doing something meaningful in the world. We don't have a sense of, I would say, understanding the deepest desires of a human heart. Like we go through, my daughters always say this. I'm like, Mom, this fractures and information saturation without really taking that information and turning that around into formation, taking into action. So that's number one. I think we lack the deep understanding the deepest desires of our heart. But also we're very distracted, Larry. We have all these devices that distract us from our purpose, from a meaningful life. And so compound that. We don't have the desires of our heart, and we're distracted. I mean, it's a recipe for, what Braveheart. It's like everybody, dies, but not everybody lives. I mean, that's what I am
True.
seeing. And I have this, this whole mantra, right, with women today, where it's like, I am woman, hear me roar, and I don't need men. And I'm just thinking to myself, that is done. That is done, because at the end of the day, we are seeing data that, hey, we're not replicating as we're not having more babies. Families are being crushed in children. We have to have a new model that allows women to be fully alive. And so I am saying we need to train so that we can be fully alive. And we need to replace that mantra with, I am woman, fully alive, ready to actually assume my role as nurturer of humanity. I'm going to bring it back to you. My role for my man is to nurture him. Like, that's my role. My womb, my biology indicates my purpose. And your capacity to nurture is very different from my capacity to nurture as a woman. And I just think we are undertrained.
I agree. We are undertrained. I say we, both men and women, for sure. Just to kind of like add some context to this, personally, I've invested a lot into myself over the years. Therapy, counseling, coaches, mentors. And there's always that part of me before I hire somebody or I do something to learn something. I always filter it through, what is this going to cost me? Like, because that's kind of like my default. Like, oh, this program's $1,000. This program's $5,000 or whatever. And I used to always, like, I would literally look at the price of something and be like, no, I don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was probably 10 years ago. I had a mentor, kind of like yours in a way, that probably spent some time with me. His program was the first program I ever joined, and he asked me this question that really completely and totally changed my world, and it's the way I look at things like this now. So before I joined his program, it was in 2015, so 11 years ago. It was $500 a month. It was a mastermind for Christian businessmen. Just you're surrounded by other Christian business owners, and we focus on marriage and parenting and our businesses and everything, our health and our finances and faith and all that. And I thought it was like snake oil. Like, I'd never been exposed to anything like that. And I'll never forget talking to my mentor about this. And he's like, you should really join this. And I'm like, man, I can't afford that. I just can't afford $500 a month. And he goes, yeah, man. And he's like in his late 60s now. So he's a bit ahead of me in life. And he looks at me, he's like, yeah, man, I get that. I used to feel that way too. He said, but, you come and do life with me and these guys, it's going to cost you $500 a month. It's also going to cost you an hour of your time every Monday to be in this group. But the answers that are going to come your way are the questions that you've always wanted to ask and you've never had the answers to. And be quite frankly with you, Larry, you probably don't even know 80% of the questions yet that you need to be asking, but you'll learn it in this group. He goes, and I know there's always a financial decision here. He goes, but here's one question. What happens if you don't do this? Mm-hmm. That's the real question. What happens if you don't learn this stuff? And when he was talking about this stuff, marriage, connection, communication, getting in the right room with the right people, what happens if you don't do this? And I'll never forget him looking at me in the eye on Skype, because there wasn't even Zoom yet. And he looked at me and he goes, call me in 24 hours with your answer. And he literally just went, and hung up on me. I called him back in 11 minutes and I said, I'm in. He said, how are you going to pay for it? I don't know. I'll figure it out. And I did. And I was like, I'll stay for a month or two. And I stayed for a year. And I could not believe the wisdom in that room. It was mind blowing. All the answers to all the questions I always wanted to ask were in there. But it took me having to ask that question of what happens if I don't. Quick pause here, because if this conversation is hitting you and you're realizing, man, I was never trained for marriage. I was never trained for fatherhood. And I certainly don't know a whole lot about leadership. I want to personally invite you to something really, really special. On February 25th at 7 p.m. Central, I am hosting a live preview call for the Dad Edge Alliance. This is not a webinar. This is not a pitch fest. This is actually an exclusive behind the curtain look at how we actually train men in real skills for marriage, parenting, leadership, and life. I'm going to walk you through how our men train weekly, how accountability actually works, and why information alone will never change anything, and how men can actually rebuild the connection, trust, and even attraction at home. Notice I didn't say chase, attraction. Attraction is way more fun than chasing. We show you how to do that too. So if you've ever felt stuck, if you've ever felt really, really frustrated, or feel like you're guessing, like every single other person out there, guessing through marriage, this is a great opportunity to get some clarity. Again, you can RSVP right now if you go to thedadedge.com/preview. Again, thedadedge.com/preview. The date, February 25th, 7 p.m. Central. See you there. Let's get back to my conversation with January. How do we, you and I are talking on this level, of like, but I think people have a really, really hard time. And I see this on the man's side, and I'm on the woman's as well. But how do we come to that place where it's like, okay, I'm done doing it this way. There's got to be a better way. So like going back to like, hey, part of what I do is I nurture him. The story I'm telling myself, January, is it probably took you some time to get to that place. Right?
Many years.
Yeah.
I waited for the right man. I waited to be the right woman to find the right man. So yes, many years. So your question, because I'm going to just speak, I think, for the woman, just because that's what my authority is that I think that it's bigger than me and it's bigger than you. I think that we need to create a counter-revolution of a re-education of our sexuality that is ordered toward truth. What I'm seeing is that what we're doing in the women's school is creating a feminine revival, meaning we have to create a revival of re-education of our sexuality, so that it's not just, hey, I'm going to sell you on your training. No, I'm going to say that we need to create a movement in our culture that says training is an essential part of our culture, and not just I'm selling one woman at a time. My vision and our vision in the women's school is a revival of a re-education. We know right now that the last 10 years that there has been a restructuring of our health industry. There has been a revolution, a food revolution. I think the next one is our education of our I think there's going to be a revolution of a revolution. Our education system has been so flawed. It's completely it's completely harming men, our education system. It's not giving men what they need, and it's suppressing women's nature. And so this, I think, education revolution, we need to come in and say, okay, I can sell you on joining, this group, but I can be part of a cultural shift of making a re-education of our sexuality the norm. That's what I feel like I'm thinking of in that level, because at the end of the day, I think that we have an obligation to create a counter-revolution to the reality of men and women today suffering because they're not fulfilled with their lives. Like, I just really feel like the time is up, and in the women's school, our vision is right now is that we are creating feminine mentorship all over the world. I mean, we're now in 52 countries, Larry. It's been 6 years we started this. We have thousands of women that are in this micro community schools, essentially, that they're training together to understand the gift of their sexuality, learning the hundreds of skills that they're not learning in our school system. Hundreds of skills, Larry. Women that don't even know that they don't know that they need these skills. So to me, the solution is to create a counter movement of saying training is not optional for a beautiful life. We need to sell women in a beautiful life. What does that mean? A beautiful marriage, a beautiful friendship, a beautiful family life, peace, order, like all the things we were never taught. We have to sell them that. We have to sell them on a new narrative that it's possible to live a very beautiful, peaceful, meaningful life and train for it. And so I think it's bigger than you and I. I think that's how we sell. So, because it's right now, I think the task is like, how do we win one person? And to me, how do we win the world to a new narrative? That's what I feel like is the solution. I know it's big and bold, but
No, I really
what's
align.
the alternative?
I really align with that a ton. I mean, obviously we call what we do is it's, hey, we are, this is a movement of men, right?
Yes.
This is a new way of living. We've said this for 10 years. But why are people so resistant to it? Even when their lives are upside down and backwards and they're miserable, but they want it, but why are we resistant to it?
Yeah, I think it's human nature, to be honest. But I think that generationally, we don't have parents that actually study together and train together. So it's just this kind of foreign concept. It's like personal development world, coaching world, and sort of not integrated with our lives. So, yeah, I just think that it's part of the human nature that we're resisting things. We're resisting change. We want to live in the comfort of our own kind of day-to-day life. And your job and my job is to sell women, I think, on themselves. We're actually going on college campuses. We're creating a feminine arrival on college campuses, and we're launching our How to Be a Woman mentorship program and course where we're going to go do a grassroots movement, and we've got to learn basic skills of how to be a woman. And so in these initiatives, I think in the men's side, I'll just say to you, I think there's a real beautiful movement that's happening of a re-education of our sexuality. I don't think that's happening so much in the women's side. I think that women are sort of falling into a false narrative. But I think it's actually, you're doing it. You're redeeming fatherhood, you're redeeming marriage. And I think these are the things that I think are going to be the future, especially with AI. I think we're going to see more of it. Yeah, I think also we need to bring in community life, like you're saying. Like, I think that has been stripped out of our norm. We're no longer amidst women and amidst men, and we're kind of have to do it on our own. So I think that the solution is that we train together, both men and women. I really believe that, it's not one, I can't just train how to be a woman and not my husband. I think that the narrative, we need to introduce a narrative that says both men and women need to train up together, skill up together, and so, yeah, I don't have an easy solution for you as it is. We need to keep selling women and men on the fact that they deserve more than that.
So what are some of the things that you said that there's hundreds of things
Yes.
that women come into your mentorship and learn?
It's right here, Larry.
Oh my God.
Hundreds of skills. So this is literally a PhD on yourself. It's the whole woman. So when we talk about, confidence, like what does even that mean? So the way we talk about skills is that every part of your life impacts every part of your life. If I'm not physically healthy, that influences my mental health. If I'm not mentally healthy, that impacts my marriage. If I'm not, and my marriage impacts the way I actually take care of my home life. My home life takes care of the way my children influences. That influences also my purpose. Maybe I'm supposed to do something to contribute value, maybe write a book. I can't do that. So there's skills in each of the arena of our lives that allow us to actually flourish, whether it's the ability to see the good and seek the good when things are not going well, the ability to manage our tonality so that we are heard, the ability to have hard conversation skills, the ability to say no to ourselves, the ability to build our morning routine, evening routine, the skill of holding a man accountable in a way that doesn't make him feel inferior, the ability to hold our friends accountable when they're gossiping, the ability to think well of people. That's a skill. These are not things that we should assume we know how to. So, because we think sometimes sort of in generalization, we break it down in the women's school with a micro skill set, because The problem that I'm seeing is that you don't need one, you need them all. If you don't know how to plan your day, and, it's going to be hard to make decisions. But let's just say you know how to plan, but you don't know how to pivot when plans don't go well. Well, that matters. Because when you're, a mom of 2-year-olds and a 4-year-old, things are not always, as planned. So those are the training that I think are missing. How do you compliment a man? That's a skill. How do you manage when he's holding you accountable? How do you respond to that? What's your tonality? What's your mindset? So these are the things that we talk about. How do you discover your purpose in every season? What are the 5 steps to managing anxiety? So we teach in frameworks and formulas.
That's really, I love how tactical this is.
It's tactical.
I do really want to highlight, I want an example of one of these. And this one is really, really fresh. So I literally, before you and I got started, I was on my Monday coaching calls. And right now I'm taking these groups through some marriage training.
Mm-hmm.
And this element of tonality really came up. And I know for men, actually not just for men, but for women too, tonality is a very, very big deal. But one of the things that one of my clients said on the group coaching call, he's like, I try to go in and talk to her, but man, her tone is this, or when she responds to me in this tone, I feel like this. And it's like, I know exactly what Tony's talking about, but I think for a man, like the tonality thing, we can feel emasculated, we can feel disrespected, unimportant, that kind of thing. But how do you teach women about tonality?
Great question. The foundation mindset, because we teach both mindset and skill set, is that by tonality alone, you can break a man or build a man.
That is so true.
So the accountability has to be fierce. I can't change you. I can only change myself. So that's the foundational mindset. Okay. So the first thing is that we actually have to study how we sound. Right? If I come up here and I'm like, hey, babe, can you do the dishes? And can you get that? Maybe he won't really think it's a big deal. Hey, babe, can I ask you a favor? Do you mind doing the dishes and also doing this? Very big difference, right? Or if I say, hey, dude, what's up, hon? Like, hey, hon, hey, how was your day? By tone alone, we can literally create a different response. The magnitude of our tonality determines the response. Now, tonality also has to come out with body language, the foundation of communication. Words are 7%, tonality, 38 and 55% body language. So how do you teach it? We have to show them that it's not just their tone. It's their choice of words, but also their facial expression and their body language. Okay? And so women need to be aware of all 3 at the same time, all the time. Practice and training is the only way. Right? And so in the women's school, we give thousands of scripts. Why? Because that's the 7%. Right? We don't know what to say. So we get ourselves into trouble. So we don't know how to talk to ourselves. So how do you talk to a man? How do you hold a man accountable? And then we teach them how it sounds like. Right? But see, here's the thing, Larry. Tonality cannot be the only thing, because also you have to present yourself. If your tonality is like this, but you're raggedy and you've disrespected the reverence in which a man sees you're his prize, that's my responsibility. I've got to look good for my man. I've got to sound good. I've got to make him feel good, and I have to be good. But tonality alone cannot be taught outside of thinking the good. Do you see what I mean? It has to be an integrated training. So tonality can't just be how I sound, because then it's performative. It's, do I actually think well of him? Do I actually see goodness in him? Do I actually see that, this is his weakness and I have to love him through that? So you have to teach tonality through practice, but in context of the whole man and the whole woman. That's why it's training.
So if you were to give me an example of, let's just say you and I were married, and you gave the example of like the dishes, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, how would you approach me or something like that?
I would say, hey babe, I need your help. Do you mind just holding the fork down and do the dishes for me? That's it. Pretty easy. That's it. But here's where I think the both a man and a woman, if a man isn't proactive and the woman feels like she has to tell him everything that
Right.
needs to be done at home, that produces resentment, lack of safety. A man's passivity is literally a woman's stress compounded over time. Like, and it sounds so elusive because it's like, what's the big deal? But if a woman needs to lead every step of the way, she's thinking about every single thing. That is exhausting. She's now both the man and the woman. So passive masculinity, which by the way, I think is a byproduct of, I think so much of the aggression of women, whatever, chicken and the egg, is so damaging. And often women are being blamed for nagging, but it's also because men are also being passive and not being proactive. So that's why it can't be either or. It has to be both. And yes, I need to work on my tonality, but I need to also have a man that I need you to lead. I need you to see what's needed. I need you. And when I have a son right now, and one of the things I'm working with him, my husband and I, is being proactive. I said, when I have to tell you what to do, you have robbed yourself the opportunity of masculinity. And I tell him that. And no cheap work. Like, these are the things as a woman, I have to train my son to be proactive now. But as a woman, also, I have to know how to talk to him so that he wants to be proactive and not nag him. Do you see? It's like both,
It's
right?
both. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I have to be able to look at our husbands and say, I love you, but that's not okay. I love you, but I need you to rise up. I can't do it on my own. The ability to hold each other accountable is important. If we tolerate, the lack of proactiveness, or the lack of leadership, and this passive sort of way of life, I'm also culpable. But that's a skill that a woman are not trained in, Larry. What are we trained in? Nagging. We assume it's just like, well, and then we go to our friends and we complain about him. No way. The reverence for your husband's reputation needs to be protected. You cannot spew your complaints of your husband to another woman. That degrades him. Like, we don't teach that. Like, to protect your spouse's reputation, hold him accountable, be fierce. Like, I'm not talking about being compliant and being sort of this small. No. Fierce and tender at the same time. This is why we need to retrain women in understanding their sexuality and how to live it well. Because the more we rise in understanding how to live out our sexuality-based, skill-based training, the more we invite men. And it's both. And, in the women's school, we talk about this called I3. We teach in frameworks and formula. And I3 is before you can, ask your man to change, right? You have to first invest in yourself. Then you can inspire him, and then you can invite him. The 3 I's. Invest in yourself. And by investing in yourself, that's how you inspire him. And it's only then, when he's inspired by you, then you can invite him. Like, why don't we teach them in married life that that's what the order is? Instead, we try to change them, but they're not inspired by us and we're not investing in ourselves.
It's really fascinating that you say that, because I can't even tell you how many guys come into our program and they're like, hey, I want to make sure my wife is doing her stuff. And I want to teach her this and show her this stuff. And we always tell guys, like, don't do that. Don't do that. You have to show by example first, right? So it's literally different language, but it's so similar to what you're saying. Once you've earned credibility and trust through example, then you can talk about it, which I think is, first do the work, invest in you, inspire, and then invite, which I love that.
Mm-hmm.
This, everything that you're talking about, like even I can definitely understand why this is internal and then external. I can't just go and do the external thing because that doesn't work. I have to do this internal thing. And going back to what you were saying, the thing that really hit me when you were talking about gossiping about, your husband, you get with girlfriends and you talk bad about your husband. Yeah, we want to save his reputation. We want to be respectful, but you also think about, like, what is that doing to the woman internally as she gossips about him?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, how is that transforming, like, her vision of her husband, right?
We have a self-image of our husband that we hold of ourselves. Self-image, the way we define it in the women's school, it's actually one of the wheels that we have, is the opinion that we hold of ourselves. But that's and we also have opinion that we hold of our husbands. So the more we perpetuate that gossip, we literally just kind of put fuel in that fire of whatever negativity it is. And, we have this part of our brain, we train women called a reticular activating system. What you focus on expands, right? And I think the more you focus on the things that you don't want, the more you're going to see more of that. But I'm going to take it even further. Women shouldn't gossip, period. Like, that should be something that we have to have fierce accountability, that we have purity of thought. Like, I have 4 girls, undeniable, they know they've never heard mom gossip or my friends gossip. Like, fierce accountability that you don't speak ill of somebody. There's a way to harvest good. Like, I, train my daughters, but there's a way to do it where you're very respectful and you preserve somebody else's opinion, but we just eliminate it. Why put that in your psychology if it doesn't fuel goodness in your life? So, no, don't do it for your men, but don't do it with other women. And then I'm going to take it even layer further. Don't do it for yourself, right? I can look at January Donovan and say, January, I think you need to work on your tonality. I think you need to work on this, but not like, oh, you're awful. You're just a horrible human being. I'm so, like, this idea of self, the way we talk to ourselves that lacks respect, I think is a lot more common. So I'm talking about integrity. I'm talking about consistency. I'm talking about don't do it to your husband, don't do it to your friends, but also don't do it to yourself. And that is a level of standard that we need to introduce as a formation and a training in our culture today, because the inconsistency is not working. I can't tell you don't gossip with your friends and you're speaking of yourself. This is how champions are made. We have to be consistent. We need to train up for it. And so I tell women all the time, it's your life. And at the end of the day, you have to go before God and say, well done, my good and faithful servant. You have become who I've created you to be. I don't force it. And the same way with my children. I said, it's your life. You're under my roof right now, and I love you so much. These are the boundaries, but it ultimately it's your life. And so I don't know where we're going full circle with that, but
I think you have to be the one to believe it is what you're saying, right? You've got to be the one to be the catalyst for this, not looking. It's a lot of internal work and integrity from what I'm getting from you.
Yes, correct.
Before we can do the outside.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. Which is why I think I believe not just having freedom, but it's having interior freedom, the freedom to choose our highest good. And this is, I'm going to say this for the men out there and the women out there. We no longer view excellence as a pursuit towards our fulfillment. Like, we've sort of hot mess mama movement, whatever, just this is how I feel, take it or leave it. Authenticity is now permission to say whatever I feel like because I feel like it. Excellence of thought, excellence of communication. We have to go back into a life of excellence. And if you go back into our young, I've got children of all ages right now, but we don't even teach excellence in handwriting. How can we think of excellence in speech? How can we think of excellence in thought? I can't just sort of change the external. Larry, I want to be able to train women to say, no, I don't want you to change your behavior that doesn't change your purity of intention. I want you to rewire so that your body actually relaxes and you see and seek the good in all things, in all situations. That's how we need to retrain women. And that's how we need to retrain men. Obviously, my authority is in women, but we can only control ourselves. And that to me is the new, I would say, I think that's the feminine revolution, is the battle for interior freedom. The freedom to become fully who we're created to be because we're capable of choosing our highest good.
You know what's so fascinating about this internal freedom that you're talking about? I've only heard one other podcast guest talk about this, but I think there's so much truth to it in every aspect because it's got to start there.
Yes.
But he was an expert on men's addiction with porn.
True. Yeah.
And he is the only podcast guest and the only expert, and I've interviewed quite a few of them on porn, who's like, you have to be internally free before you think you can actually overcome this external habit. Yes. And he talks all about it. But that was the first time I ever heard that terminology. I was like, oh my gosh, that's so true. I can do like these 20 things tactically outside, but if I don't change the internal operating system, this is not gonna last.
Yeah, it's not sustainable. I'll tell you a story about, I think that's a good story because I think that let's just go, if we can dip into the pornography thing. From a woman's perspective, I think, and it could be both men and women who struggle with pornography, we tolerate it. We get what we tolerate for. Okay. The standard, I believe, from a woman's perspective, needs to be created by a woman. Okay, so let me just give you a real example. When I first started dating my husband, it was, I guess, like 20 years ago. I remember, like pornography was something that was rampant, like anything internet. And I remember it was so clear that in his mind, when we met, we didn't even talk about it, that if there was even an ounce of that, I was gone. Like it was gone. Like it was never even a question. It was a standard. And I remember asking later on, after I'm married, I was like, was this an issue in your life? I said, yes, but I knew that if I did, I would lose you. And I would have completely. And I still, by the way, like it still is such a clear standard that there's no victimization involved here. Like, I think we victimize, because I train thousands of women. Oh, I feel so bad for him. He's had a traumatic life. I'm like, we've all had a traumatic life. Like, you tolerating his traumatic life is enabling him to actually become a lesser version of himself. It's like, I just feel bad. I said, your feeling bad doesn't make him a better version of himself, nor does it make you actually happier wife. We have to take a stand to what is actually noble and righteous. And clearly, Larry, I don't want my husband looking at other women, period. And nor do you. Like, from just like a logical perspective, can you imagine making love to your wife and your wife is thinking of another man and vice versa? Like,
No.
Gross. Do you see what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Let's just bring it to that basic common sense. No one wants that. The deep desire of a woman is to be admired by her man. Admiration is something that literally releases us from our walls. Women don't even ask for it. They don't know they deserve it. They don't know they can want it. But that's this universal desire of a woman. Guess what happens when you're in a sexual encounter and you're thinking of another woman? Women can feel it, Larry. But see, if I don't know how to hold my man accountable to a level of a standard that's a non-negotiable line, I will inevitably tolerate that. But simultaneously, if I don't have reverence for my femininity and I don't respect myself enough to take care of my body, take care of my mind, pursue my highest good, I won't demand it from him either. So no, we can't just sort of this like, well, we've all had a hard life, Larry. That's why I think the solution for the future is both men and women need to rise up knowing we have baggage from the past, but casting a better future of the kind of future that we can design for ourselves so we can sign up for. That's what I want. I want a marriage where at 50 and 60 we're holding hands and he's still pursuing me. I want a marriage where we're traveling together and still in love. Like, we have to cast that vision and sell it to the world and say, I can fight for that. There's no more role models that used to be like our grandparents and in love at 50 and 60. We have to restore that. The role model gives us hope that it's possible. And, I do the same thing for motherhood. Women always say, oh, motherhood is hard. That's because we're undertrained. Motherhood is easy. But I had Elena for 10 years and I cried those tears, of learning to clean the kitchen in 5 minutes, not 30. I had to time myself, Larry. I had to learn how to cook for 20 people and using whatever we had in the pantry and cook and clean in an hour before and afterwards. Those are non-negotiable trainings. And what does that do to a woman? It makes you think of, how can I make sure I make a really good meal for my husband without making the kitchen like, this World War III. All that matters. All these micro training that allows us to be a better woman for our man.
I'm going to say something here, and because I just feel like it needs to be said. I love everything you're saying. I really, really do, because I think if both people really knew like a role that they played in this, right, and the training that went behind it, I think we'd have much more fulfilling marriages. At the same time, I'm I'm thinking the example that you just used pissed off a lot of women that listen to this show.
Of course they do.
Because they're like, are you serious? Do you think I have time for all that? Do you think that like I'm going to be able to do that? Like, what's wrong with you, woman? Like, I can literally hear the voices like coming through right now, right? And I want to give you an opportunity to speak to those women.
Yeah.
Because here's what I'll say. I kind of want to prep you for this a little bit.
Sure.
Because I think that that's depending on where somebody's at with their journey.
Mm-hmm.
I think we were all there. Like I'll never forget January, like being in a therapist's office with my wife. And I'm sitting here pointing out all the things that I think she's doing wrong in the relationship. And the therapist just looked at me and he goes, stop. I said, stop what? He goes, just stop. And I was like, okay, what? And he goes, what part do you play in this? Like, do you have any idea all the things that you're missing here? He's like, I try to keep a lot of my opinions to myself, but I'm going to tell you this for what it is. You're missing a ton of things, a ton. You're pointing the finger all at her, being like, this is all her fault, when there's tons of things that you're not doing right, my man. But here's what he told me. He goes, but here's the thing, man. You've never been taught any of this stuff. And most of us have to really learn the hard way. And sometimes the hardest way is getting divorced, because these things never get solved. So I'll never forget when he told me that. And I'm like, I want to like get up and punch him and just defend and be like, do you know everything I'm doing? I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing that. And he probably would have been like, yeah, it's all the wrong shit, probably, right? But like, how have you handled, I guess, people coming at you and be like, are you serious? Do you have any idea what you're asking me to do?
Number one, I can't change anybody who's not willing to change.
Yeah.
I just can't, like, that's the reality. You know, I had a pretty crappy life. I didn't see my parents. You know, I had adultery all over my family. I had a really, I was depressed. I endured, depression. Like, we can choose the life that we want. So I can't sell you on something you don't want to be sold. So that's number one, right? Number two, if there's any inkling in your heart and you have any kind of hope of wanting a beautiful life, I'm going to speak to you and say, it's not your fault. You were never trained. Stop blaming and shaming yourself for the choices nobody ever showed you how to make. And number three, you can redesign a beautiful life if you're open and willing to train up for it. So it's not for everyone, but it's for women who say, I want to give it a shot. This is the only life I have. They are my only children. This is the man I love. This is my only body. This is my home. And if you are out there and saying, you know what? I'm willing to lay down with complete humility to see if there's a shot in my life, then I'll say you have a bright future. Because there's always hope for somebody who's willing to have the humility to change herself. But nobody can teach somebody who's unwilling to open their heart.
That is so true. That is so true. You know, what's funny is our messaging is so similar. I always tell guys, I'm like, if you don't know what to do in your marriage, it's not your fault. You were never taught this stuff. It's really not your fault. Like, you're just like everybody else trying to figure it out. But then I follow that up and I do say, but there's so many resources now to get it done. And now it is your fault if you don't do anything about it. So that my messaging is a little bit of grace, but a little bit of tough love too. It's like, hey, like, I get it. Like, none of us are taught this, but now you can, if you want, if you're willing, right? Not everybody are willing, but January, I got to tell you, this has been awesome. I have really enjoyed this. I think you're going to have a lot of guys who are curious about what you do. And I know we have a lot of women who listen to the show too, but what is the best place for people to find you? And it sounds like you have a plethora of resources.
Yes. You can just go to January Donovan on Instagram. But I think the best way to join is just go to the woman's JanuaryDonovan.com, and you can learn about how you can become a student and how also you can become a mentor for women, which is part of one of the things that we're really doing that allows women to train together. So JanuaryDonovan.com, and you can learn more about our program.
Well, guys, we're going to have all the links in the show notes for you. I'm going to make this really easy for you. All you have to do is go to thedadedge.com/1436. We'll have all of January's resources in there, her Instagram, her website, as well as a lot of resources that I'll put in there for you as well. And obviously all the show notes too, that we talked about today. But Thank you so much for coming on, January. This was awesome.
I'm so grateful. Thank you.
I know I wish the stars could have aligned when I could have released this in January instead of February. It really, really hit home the name, but no.
It's so funny.
No,
Well, I forget that that's like the common thing in January. I always have the January joke. I had a teacher that called me December, like all throughout the year.
Yeah.
Because it was just but anyways, thank you for that great interview. I think we're offline, right?
No, we're not. We're still recording. That's okay. It's all right.
Well, it's, I get so fierce about this that I'm so trained, but actually in real life, I'm pretty goofy and relaxed and love a really good quality, wholesome conversation. So thank you for this time.
Yeah.
For the men out there, we need you. That's all I have to say.
We do. And for the women out there that you're helping, thank you for saying yes to January, because that's a huge help for us too. But thank you so much for coming on.
You're welcome. Thank you, Larry.